Doing a session on craft innovation and the circular economy. I have some amazing guests with me today. I'm so excited to start this session. Before we jump in, I'd like to hand the mic over to Devika from British Council to introduce us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Aliya. And before we just move into the panel, a very warm welcome to all of you from the British Council and the Fashion Revolution series, Crafting Connections. I'm sorry about my video, but I'm in very low connectivity. But just without my video on, I'm going to quickly give you a little bit background about the series in general and then pass it back to Aliya. My name is Devika, and I'm the country's lead for the Crafting Futures program in India. And I'm sure, as you all know, the British Council is the UK's international organization for cultural relations and educational opportunities, which is echoed in the ambitions of some of our crafts programs in India. Through a grant scheme, Crafting Futures in India brings together Indian and UK partners to collaborate on projects which explore new futures for craft. Crafting Connections is a part of the larger Crafting Futures program, which is conceptualized in partnership with Fashion Revolution India. And through this exciting digital series, we aim to engage with the wider craft sector and enable networking opportunities and market linkages between artisans and communities. In light of the rapidly evolving COVID-19 situation in India and the UK, we understand that this is a very difficult time for the craft sector and the artisans. Nevertheless, we firmly believe that culture connects us, and at this time of uncertainty, it is creativity and collaboration that binds us together. So today, the British Council and Fashion Revolution reaches out across digital frontiers and national boundaries in solidarity with the many inspiring craftspeople in India and beyond. This series, until Feb 2021, will showcase some exciting conversations and bring to the forefront some unique India-UK collaborations in craft. Today's conversation is super special as we have amongst us some of the most creative minds in craft and design. And as you will see, they represent the fabulous diversity of the Indian craft sector. And it is with motivated and passionate partners like the Fashion Revolution, we're able to reach out to this wide network of craftspeople and some of the best minds in craft and innovation. So on that note, I'd like to quickly pass it back to Aliya, who will be introducing each of the panelists and will delve deeper into the discussion. Thanks so much, Aliya. Over to you.
Thank you, Devika. So our session today is craft innovation and the circular economy. At Fashion Revolution, we are extremely supportive of the idea of a circular economy, but we are concerned and we would like people to reflect on how that circular economy is going to be put into practice so that the circular economy itself is sustainable and doesn't replicate systems which we're currently following that are leading to resource crunch, scarcity, and many other challenges towards sustainable development. When we talk about slow living and sustainable living, it always amazes me that we fail to recognize how much of the Indian subcontinent has historically lived sustainably and has had a very sustainable economy. And I feel, my colleagues and I feel that instead of reinventing the wheel in India, we maybe need to look at what we have that is already part of us, that has been hidden, and that could be an asset in creating a very stable, sustainable economy, which will lead to much more long-term prosperity and generally much more healthy trade and improved standards of living. Today, we're going to look at plastic waste and textile waste. And we have with us the entire value chain of operators, from the artisans to the folks who will eventually be retailing this. There's some wonderful range of inputs and experiences. And I'm going to start off by introducing our speakers. We have with us Rajiben.vankar. Rajiben.vankar was born into the Vankar community in Kotai village in Gujarat. In a male-dominated world, she is not just a weaver, but a craft entrepreneur. Turning the tide on plastic, Rajiben upcycles plastic waste into bags and accessories. Rajiben has worked and collaborated with Diti Kotecha. Diti is a graphic designer from India. She currently lives in Greece. Diti, I first met Diti when she was doing graphic design for one of India's first organic cotton clothing companies, No Nasties. So Diti has been very much part of my personal journey in understanding more about the space. Diti founded Thela a few years ago. Thela is a plastic upcycling initiative which handcrafts products made out of discarded plastic. We also have with us Radhi Parekh. Radhi is the founder director of Artisans, India's first gallery at the intersection of craft and design. Artisans is in the forefront of a movement to advance India's unique creative economies through initiatives that sustain livelihoods and raise consumer consciousness. A graduate in visual communications from the National Institute of Design, Radhi returned to India in 2009 from a career spanning 2 decades, 3 continents, and several technologies. A maker herself, Radhi is passionate about all things artisanal, continues to teach us and about design as well as about what is now at the vanguard of craft in India. My next and the last panelist I'd like to introduce is Bhaavya from Iro Iro Zero Waste. Bhaavya is also a very key part of Fashion Revolution India. She is our regional head for Jaipur. Bhavya's work at Iro Iro inspires us hugely, not just in India, but also globally. Bhavya was one of the Fashion Open studios that we presented this year at during Fashion Revolution Week. If you haven't seen that video, please do check it out. We'll share the link in the chat right now. So now that the intros are over, I would like to start the session. I'm going to start the session by asking Radhi and Bhavya to please tell us a little bit about this upcoming exhibition, which they're going to be launching at Artisans, which is one of Bhavya's capsule collections, and explain to us what is this collection, why is it so special, and why has Artisans chosen to support it? Thank you. Please start.
Ma'am, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Aliya, and thank you, Devika. It's wonderful to be here with Rajiben, with Bhaavya, and with Diti. When I first saw Bhavya's proposal of the Khabardar collection, where she was reusing textile waste in Jaipur, and as we know, Jaipur is a great center for textiles. And that's why also you have the paper mills there, handmade paper as well. I thought that this was really wonderful, that she was not just looking at surplus pre-consumer waste, but she was also looking at surplus yarn, like khadi yarn, and all sorts of 3 different sources of waste, including khameer in Gujarat, but also the local waste that she was able to source. And what was exciting was that she was weaving this waste to create a new textile, which is Iro Iro's signature textile. She uses it in a very innovative way. Every meter, the color of the textile changes. So it gives her the ability to be able to create zero waste silhouettes, but not only is the material zero waste, but the silhouettes too are zero waste. And, each wearer gets a completely different experience of Iro Iro. It's a different color blocking that each product carries. And from what I know and have seen of the products, they're all khadi, they're hand spun and hand woven. And the fact that she called it Khabardar, because I thought that was really, for me, what made it different is the concept behind it, where she really talked about making change and being this brave change maker in a world such as the one that we would all like. Fashion revolution, crafting futures is all about a future where we see hope and where each of us can be that change maker and be relatively khabardar. So that's what I really loved about Bhavya's new collection. And in addition to that, I hope I'm not giving it all away, Bhavya, but what was also exciting is that it's a completely inclusive collection. So it's gender neutral. A lot of the shapes are gender neutral. They're androgynous. And I think that this is a very, very exciting new new direction for fashion in India. Just before I give it to Bhavya, I wanted to just recap on some of the conversations Bhavya and I have had about silhouettes and about the use of waste. And it's very, very simple. It's just to remind ourselves, as Aliya said, that recycling, repair, reuse is really not new to India's economy. India's economy has always been about thrift until recently, and that too probably more in the urban centers when we began to become consumerist and began to generate waste. But, from agricultural waste to industrial waste to, of course, textile waste, we've been amazing at this whole notion of giving a longer life to what we make, not just from fabric, fiber, fabric, and fashion, but the second life that we give it through the reincarnations of products that are made out of waste. Bhavya, I'd love you to talk about some of the work, and if you could share maybe some images of how it's made.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this introduction. First of all, I'm completely overwhelmed. As you said, what sort of the aim of even Iro Iro has been is to talk about display Indian design in a contemporary context, and to really showcase its power in the way that it isn't something we already have these practices that we've been all exposed to since childhood, even as domestic systems, how hunkered is made and how everything is sort of reused and finds a purpose again. So for me, it became important to talk about Indian aesthetics and Indian design in the contemporary context. But what also became important eventually, because I had a platform and I have a voice to also voice what concerns me, and what is going on in the country is concerning at the moment. And through this collection, what we really wanted to focus on was also bring in this concept of new heroes, and who are these people who are who've risked their lives to get us the news. So really celebrating journalists. And so I will just share the look, just a few images. Just a minute. I'm not able to share the screen, but so the basic concept of the collection was to talk about these journalists, and as well as bring in the Indian aesthetics, and as well as to upcycle.
Try again with the screen share. Just give it one more go.
So this is basically what the collection looks like, and it's called Khabardar because when you pronounce Khabardar more slowly, it is almost someone who's bringing you the news. So unprotector of the news. So Khabardari. So it just made sense to talk about the story right now. And as Radhi ma'am said, all of the waste that we've sourced for this collection was from the one source of the waste was the garment factories that are exporting all of this waste, all of these garments to elsewhere in the world. The second source was actually Khamir. It's an NGO in Gujarat which makes which is reviving this indigenous type of cotton. And one source of it was with the artisans that I work with, who had a lot of dead stock khadi yarn. So of course, why we sort of needed to talk about this collection was important. So this is how basically an Iro Iro product is made. First, we source waste, we sort it out. While sorting it out, we make sure that we've sorted it out according to color, according to its size, according to its weight. And this is all done by women in this particular village, where we've organized a space for them, where men are not allowed to come, where they could come without any fear. And what this process has also done is build a sort of a community for these women to have conversations that they wouldn't have been able to have otherwise. And to just see that has been a really gratifying experience of the whole journey of Iro Iro. So once they have this waste, they sort it out and according to color, convert it into linear form. Then it is converted into a ball like this, and it's taken on the bobbin, and according to a specific textile design, it is woven into a new fabric. Now, what we also do is we try and experiment a lot with what is going on within the village, what were the practices. So if there are a lot of neem trees, so we try and utilize neem leaves to create a color. If there are a lot of onion peels, then we'll try and utilize those to create a color. And this time what I saw was they had a lot of khadi yarns, handspun yarns that were just lying around and they couldn't sell them. And if they wove fabric for them, they wouldn't be paid as much. So I utilized that yarn and we created this fabric, which has that kind of seersucker quality to it, which makes it very suitable for summers as well as winters. Because there's a juxtaposition of a thicker yarn with the thinner yarn. And then Khabardar is also about who are these journalists and why we need to talk about these journalists. So each look is named after one of our new heroes. For example, this look is for Anama Matthew, and Anama Matthew was the editor and the founder of the first women's magazine in India. And the most interesting thing in research that I found was that she'd invite women at her home to share their stories. She wasn't looking to sensationalize anyone. She wasn't looking for anything that is going to create some sort of, huge or going to get her publicity. It was more about putting these domestic stories and documenting these domestic stories and putting them out. By that act alone, she made the lives of women as relevant as those of men, because lives of women weren't spoken or articulated or documented. So this was our tribute to her. The second journalist that we focused on was Humayun Verawala. And Humayun Verawala was the first female photojournalist in India. And she was somebody really fun to research. Like all of these people, while researching, I got a sense that somehow there are women I know who like carry these facets with them of these people. And Humayun Verawala is just this really fun person who once said that she wears sari to work because men think that that is something that that just makes her less threatening to places. So she carries her camera, she wears a sari, and she documents the most, documents the things that men in suits never can, because they would never get access to those places. So for me, she became a new hero to sort of talk about and also document and be inspired by. And the third team that we were really inspired by was the Himmat team that brought us the news during the emergency time. Emergency was really the time when everything was censored, and they risked their lives to make sure that we are getting the real news. And that was just something that if people could do it in 1970s, then maybe there is still hope that we might be able to get some news. So that is all about the Khabardar collection. And that is the collection that we'll be showcasing at Artisans. And we are very, really happy to do that. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Aliya.
Thank you so much, Bhaavya. Thank you. Before we move on to talking about plastic, I just had a couple of questions for Radhi and you. Radhi, is this the first time you're doing an upcycled collection or something that's been made from waste at Artisans?
No, no, it hasn't. It's been part of our focus almost from the beginning. So we started Artisans in 2011, and we were very we approached fashion and apparel design quite gingerly. We were very careful to really find people who are working with material and creating textiles. But in 2017, we did an exhibition, and it was also for the Lakme Fashion Week, called Reincarnations. And we had many of the people who now are at the forefront of circular economy and design, such as I was a sari, a jewelry designer, Gauri Pathare, who designs with waste metal, and very interesting. And then a couple of footwear designers who use, one of whom uses the tire rubber for the footwear, but the other one uses textile waste. And then there was an artist Smriti Dikshit, who uses textile waste as well as all sorts of consumer waste, including the plastic price tags as part of her medium. And all of them had this very important message that, as important as it is to know where the fiber was coming from and how it became part of the fabric and the fashion, what was the life after fashion? What was that second life that we could look at for products, and not in the kind of trendy way in which we're now hearing about it from the West, but how could we look at the roots that we had and begin the conversation there. So not at all the first time, but the first time where at this time of year we have artisanal Christmas, and every year we have a different theme. And this year it's an upcycled artisanal Christmas, which is not to say that you recycle your gifts, but that the gifts are made out of recycled materials. And it's also about adding value to waste in the way that Rajiben does, in the way that Bhaavya does, and giving value as a retailer to something that can't really be scaled. As you said, Aliya, it is slow fashion. It's fashion that is done in small quantities. And Bhaavya is quite concerned about inventory and that sort of waste. So she's doing a lot to order. So yesterday we had a client whose size we didn't have, who Bhaavya will be doing something to order. So I think these are all very important, to recognize the voices of designers like Bhaavya and Rajiben, to recognize that it comes from an economy where we could really celebrate our attitude of thrift and reuse and creative reuse. And one of the biggest challenges is to have the consumers be conscious enough to make those choices. So that, I think, is one of the greatest challenges for us, is to bring the maker and the buyer on the same page, and sharing these values that we're talking about, particularly at a time when climate change is on everyone's mind. So, yeah.
No, I think that's, it's wonderful that retailers are seeing things differently, because that's the touch point. Up until now, for most consumers, the first time they see a product that's made made in a conscious way, it's because somebody had took the initiative to stock it, and to give it that platform and give it that voice. And I think that retailers are really like, they're the first line of defense. So I think that's something that I've always observed, and I'm very happy to see how people are in general understanding that there's so many possibilities out there, both from the designer side as well as from the retailer side, and obviously from customer sides. So thank you so much for that perspective. I am now going to move over to the plastic story. And I would like Diti and Rajiben to please unmute themselves, or we will unmute you.
Hi everybody.
Hi. So why don't we just jump in, and why don't you tell us what's been going on and how Thela came about? And yeah.
Okay. So hi everyone. I'm Diti. I am a graphic designer from Mumbai, India, and I currently live in Athens, in Greece. And when I moved here a few years ago, I started a plastic upcycling initiative that handcrafts products with plastic waste. So I deal with plastic waste on one side, because I feel that plastic is the most harmful material to dispose of into the environment with the current recycling technologies that are being used, which are not closed loop. And also focusing on handcrafted techniques, because that is the least intrusive. I do admire newer technologies that tackle plastic waste, like shredding and molding of plastic, and I do also collaborate with these organizations. But I am more familiar with handicraft. My mother studied and practiced a lot of crafts like embroidery and crochet. She used to be a craft teacher when I was a child. I have volunteered while I was in India with ethical handicraft units and helped empower these communities with handicrafts. So yes, I'm more familiar with it. And, I'd rather pick up a crochet hook and start making things, because I see an immediate result. And it is so fascinating to me how a piece of yarn can transform into a fabric, and how with such a humble technique, one can convert a product with such a humble origin and use, that of a plastic carry bag, for example, and converting this and making it into something that is high fashion. For me, that is very fascinating, and that is the core of Thela. So, of course, the story behind Thela is it started when I moved to Athens, and I was confronted with a much higher level of plastic consumption than what we are used to back in India. I think in India, growing up in the 80s, we did not know of single-use disposable products. Like, we never grew up with toilet paper. There were no fast food and takeaway restaurants. So we grew up with a lot less plastic. Whereas when I moved here, I felt that the plastic consumption is a lot more normal and a lot more challenging to avoid. And most people don't know or have forgotten how they lived without plastic. But I think us being in a position to have lived through its emergence, it definitely made me more sensitive to its impact and inspired me to do something about it. And of course, I started this initiative not only to reduce the amount of plastic that ends up in landfills, but also increase awareness about its impact and easy alternatives. So yeah, that's how my journey began. And I started with literally, since I know how to crochet, I started literally with collecting plastic waste from garbage bins and supermarkets and washing them, drying them, and cutting them from the bathtub in my bathroom, and crocheting products myself. And then in order to expand, I started working with like-minded organizations in India, like Khamir and Rajiben, to source the plastic woven fabrics, and then I would get them tailored at a fair trade unit in Mumbai. And I work very closely with these organizations. They follow the same technique as me, but on a much larger scale. So I think Khamir collects about 100 kilos of plastic waste every month. And the process is the same, the washing and converting it into yarn before they weave with the products. But I do work very closely with them to make it as sustainable and zero waste as possible. So for example, I get, like, depending on the product that I'm making, I get the sheet sizes custom made. So while tailoring, there is no cutting involved, because when we cut plastic, they're really tiny pieces of plastic, which are actually microplastic, and that is a lot more harmful than an entire plastic bag. And another thing is, like, the fabric, for example, consists of a warp and a weft. So the weft is the discarded plastic waste. And for the warp, conventionally, what is used is nylon, because it's sturdy. But nylon is new plastic. And at Thela, we didn't want to do that. So we tried working with recycled plastic yarn, but it didn't work because the looms are really old. They're traditional looms and the yarn kept snapping. And also I feel that this recycled plastic yarn, again, is not closed loop recycling, where, a closed loop recycling is when, say, you're recycling a plastic bottle into another plastic bottle. So there is no downcycling, there's no reduction in the quality of the plastic. But what they're doing here is they're recycling the plastic bottle to make yarn for t-shirts, for example. So there's a lot of energy consumption there. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of microplastic generated, and there's a reduction in quality. So what we are working with Khamir and with Rajiben is to use naturally dyed organic cotton for the warp, which may not be as sturdy as nylon, but then we work with the design of the product to enhance its sturdiness in another way. So that's what we are doing at Thela with the handcrafted organizations in Kutch. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I was wondering if you would just talk a little bit about working with Rajiben, and ask Rajiben to tell us a little bit more about how she got into this initiative from being in a village in Gujarat.
Sure. So I met Rajiben first in Khamir, where she was pretty much running the whole plastic upcycling process. I know quite a bit about her story, but I'm going to let her say that. We worked together a lot with getting things custom made. And then when she left Khamir and began working independently, under the guidance of an organization called Karigar Clinic, I started also working independently with her to get some products made. So now I work with Khamir and Rajiben both separately. So yeah, that's about it. And then I'll speak to Rajiben and ask her a few questions and probably help translate with the Gujarati. So can we unmute Rajiben? Hi Rajiben, કેમ છો? બધાને જાણવું હતું કે તમારી વાર્તા શું છે, તમે કેવી રીતે વણાટનું કામ કરવા માંડ્યા ને એ પણ પ્લાસ્ટિક સાથે.
મારું નામ રાજીબેન વાંકર છે. આમ તો મોટર સમાજમાંથી છું, વાંચતા તો મને પહેલેથી આવડે છે. પણ જ્યારે ખમીર સંસ્થામાં કામ કરતી હતી ત્યારે મેં જોયું કે વેસ્ટ પ્લાસ્ટિકનું જ્યારે વીવિંગ જોયું ત્યારથી મને એવું લાગ્યું કે આ ખરેખર આવું કામ કરવું જોઈએ, કેમ કે વેસ્ટ પ્લાસ્ટિક વણાટ એવી વસ્તુ છે કે આપણે પર્યાવરણને બચાવી શકાય છે. તો
એક મિનિટ, હું છે ને ઇંગ્લિશમાં બધાને કહું એટલે તમે થોડી વાર્તા બોલો ને પછી હું ઇંગ્લિશમાં. So Rajiben said that she comes from a traditional weaving background, so she learned how to weave growing up as a child, and she got into plastic weaving for its environmental impact. And also a little bit of what I know about her story is when her husband passed away, she was left to tend to her children on her own. So she began working at a construction site, and one of the eldest weavers in her village encouraged her to go and work at Khamir. So, and at that time, coincidentally, Khamir had just started this plastic weaving initiative. And Rajiben has always been very interested and interested in new things going on. She's extremely enthusiastic and entrepreneurial. So in spite of having a very difficult financial background, she was very keen and eager and curious to kind of see what is happening there. And because of her entrepreneurial nature, she landed up running the entire initiative in Khamir. Sorry, I think I said much more than what she was saying, but I'll let her continue. Ha, Rajiben, pachi?
બસ ત્યાંથી મને એવું લાગ્યું કે મારે જ્યારે ખમીરમાં જોયું વેસ્ટ પ્લાસ્ટિક વણાટ, પછી છે ને મને એવું લાગ્યું કે મેં બધા બહેનોને તાલીમ આપવા જતી હતી ગામડે ગામડે, અને મને ખ્યાલ આવ્યો કે ક્યાંથી પ્લાસ્ટિક કલેક્ટ કરવું, કેવી રીતના કટ કરવું, વીવિંગ કરવું, એ થોડું મને નોલેજ ત્યાંથી ખમીરમાં મળ્યું. પછી ખમીરવાળાને પણ એવું લાગ્યું કે તમારી પાસે બધું નોલેજ છે તો તમે પોતાના પગભર થઈ અને બીજા બહેનોને મદદ કરી શકો છો. તો પછી મેં પણ એવું વિચાર્યું કે ઠીક છે, તો પછી વિચારી મેં ખમીર મૂકી, નોકરી મૂકી અને પછી મેં પોતાનું વણાટ કામ શરૂ કર્યું અને બીજા બહેનો સાથે કામ કરવા લાગી કે જે બહેનોને જરૂર હોય કામ કરવાની, એવા બહેનોને જોડી અને ત્યારે હું એ બહેનો સાથે કામ કરું છું.
અચ્છા, ભલે એક મિનિટ હું સમજાવું. So she said that at Khamir, she learned everything about the entire process, which is, going to these waste collection points and illegal dump yards and collecting the waste and separating this waste, washing this waste on a really large scale and cutting it into yarn and weaving with it. So of course, although she knows how to weave, it is a very different material. Plastic is a very different material to work with than a textile yarn. And I experienced that myself with crochet. And after maybe, 10 years of working with Khamir, the organization encouraged her to start out on her own and do something with her skills on her own. And since then, she's been working independently with where she does the weaving herself and has other women in her village who also weave for her. Ha, Rajiben.
બસ હવે ત્યારે ખૂબ મજા આવે છે કામ કરવા સાથે, બહેનો સાથે, બધા સાથે, કેમ કે એ કામ એવું છે કે આપણે કામ કરતા એક તો બહેનો સાથે બધા સાથે કામ કરવા મજા આવે છે. પછી બીજું એ કે આપણે પર્યાવરણને બચાવીએ છીએ, તો એ અમને એક ખુશી મળે છે આવું કામ કરતા. તો એ કામ તો શરૂ થઈ ગયું, મને એક જે નોલેજ હતી મળી ગઈ, બહેનોનું ગ્રુપ મળી ગયું, પણ પછી એક પ્રશ્ન એવો હતો કે અમે કામ કરીને વેચાણ કરવું છે. તો પછી એના પછી એક નિલેશભાઈ જે કારીગર ક્લિનિક કરીને અમદાવાદમાં છે, તો એને ખ્યાલ આવ્યો, તો એ મારી પાસે આવી અને મને કીધું કે તમે કામ કરો છો, અગર મારી કઈ જરૂર હોય તો મને પણ કહેજો, હું તમારી મદદ કરીશ. તો પછી અમને ત્યારે માર્કેટિંગની જરૂર હતી, તો નિલેશભાઈ અમને ખૂબ મદદ કરી છે. અને અત્યારે પણ એક્ઝિબિશનમાં, હમણાં તો લોકડાઉનની લીધે બંધ છે, પણ 2-3 વખતે અમે એક્ઝિબિશનમાં ગયા, અમારું બહુ સારું સેલ થયું. તો નિલેશભાઈ થ્રુ અમે અત્યારે કામ અમારું જે ઓનલાઈન સેલ જે બધું છે એ નિલેશભાઈ મદદ કરી રહ્યા છે અમારી.
Okay. So, yeah, since then, with the help and support of Khamir, she started working independently with these women. And it was something she really enjoyed doing, working with them and socializing with them. And at some point, she got approached by Nilesh Bhai from Karigar Clinic. So Nilesh Bhai, through Karigar Clinic, helps artisans become independent with their craft, so that they don't have to work with other mediating marketing agencies to get work. So she helps them become a little more independent, get an online presence. So with the help of Karigar Clinic, she now has a social media presence. They're working towards building a website. Karigar Clinic takes Rajiben and her work to several exhibitions and talks. So through Karigar Clinic, Rajiben has that exposure. And Nilesh Bhai has been helping Rajiben expand her craft. And Karigar Clinic also talks a lot about the work she's doing in the field of upcycling and with plastic waste. Ha, Rajiben.
બસ અત્યારે અમે કામ ચાલુ છે, પણ થોડું વેચાણનું છે, જે અત્યારે લોકડાઉન વજહથી વેચાણ ઓછું થઈ રહ્યું છે. થાય છે ઓનલાઈન થોડું, પણ પેલા જેટલું ઓછું નથી થતું, કેમ કે અત્યારે લોકો ઘરે કોઈ આવી નથી શકતા. પેલા અમારે ઘરે કસ્ટમર આવતા, સ્ટુડન્ટ આવતા હતા, તો એ નથી આવતા અને અમે ક્યાં બહાર નથી રહી શકતા. તો એક એ પ્રોબ્લેમ છે. અને બીજો એક એ પ્રોબ્લેમ છે કે જ્યારે પ્લાસ્ટિક કલેક્ટ હોય ત્યારે અમને થોડું બીક પણ લાગતી હોય છે, કેમ કે અત્યારે એવું થાય છે કે જે પ્લાસ્ટિક કલેક્ટ કર્યું હોય ક્યાંથી આવી હોય, કે દવાવાળી હોય કે ખબર નહીં ક્યાંથી આવી હોય, તો એ થોડું અમે ધ્યાનમાં રાખી અને ગામડે ગામડે જઈ અને પ્લાસ્ટિક કલેક્ટ કરીએ છીએ. પછી સોસાયટીની બહેનો જો હોય એ ભેગું કરે છે, ત્યાંથી પણ કલેક્ટ કરી અને એવી રીતે અમે પ્લાસ્ટિક કલેક્ટ કરીને એનું વણાટ કરીએ છીએ.
Acha. Okay, so Rajiben said that she really enjoys her work, but currently because of COVID and the pandemic, things are very slow, even online, in terms of retail, which is something that I'm facing as well, as Thela. And earlier she used to also have a lot of students coming and collaborating with her, but travel has reduced, so that is also very less. And another issue, which is also something that I've been facing with Khamir, is that people are very reluctant to collect this plastic waste now, especially with COVID and the pandemic. So instead of, from what I understand, I mean, her connection is quite, there's a lot of disturbance. From what I understand, she said that they now go to individual houses to collect waste directly from the source, instead of having to go to the bhangarwaras.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
That's,
તો sorry.
હા રાજીબેન, બીજું કાંઈ છે તમને કહેવાનું?
બસ એટલું કેવું હતું કે જે અમારી પછી રીતના કલેક્ટ કરી અને પ્રોડક્ટ બનાવી છીએ, તો એ પ્રોડક્ટ અમારી બહુ એવી છે કે બહુ મોટી નથી, નાની નાની છે. 1000 થી નીચેની વસ્તુ જે પણ હોય છે એ અમે બનાવી છે, કેમ કે બધા લોકો એને ખરીદી શકે. બહુ મોંઘી હોય તો કોઈ નથી ખરીદી શકતા. તો અમારી પ્રોડક્ટ જે છે 1000 થી નીચે છે.
સાચી વાત છે. So due to the pandemic, they've also innovated on the kinds of products they make to make it more affordable. And smaller products that are easier as gifting items, and products that are below 1,000 rupees. So maybe not the larger items like the larger beach bags, but maybe knick-knack trays and spectacle cases. I saw that recently on her account. Smaller things that are more affordable for people to buy. So these are the kind of learnings and innovations that I think not just Rajiben, but all of us have been trying to adopt.
Great. I just wanted to ask if you could ask Rajiben, what would she like to see happen for this the plastic as a, plastic waste? Is this something? Is there government support? Is there anything, what is lacking? I guess if what is what are the because and I'm sure with Karigar Clinic they've been exploring many ways of growing their market. So if she could just give us like the 2 things that she would like to see done differently, or just a little bit of perspective on from the ground, and what is lacking.
Okay, I'm going to try with my limited Gujarati. Rajiben, આલિયા પૂછે છે કે તમે અત્યારે જે પ્લાસ્ટિક વીવિંગ ને બધું કરો છો ને એમાં તમને કેવું બદલાવ જોઈએ છે? 1-2 વસ્તુ તમે કહી સકો, કાં તો ગવર્મેન્ટની તરફથી કચ્છમાં શું અલગ થવું જોઈએ જે તમારી માટે થોડુંક સારું પડે, કાંઈક સપોર્ટ કે એવું કાંઈ?
એક તો પહેલી વાત તો હું એ કહું કે પહેલા તો બધાને એક મેસેજ આપણે આપીએ કે પ્લાસ્ટિક જે છે એ બંધ થવું જોઈએ. જે આપણે યુઝ કરીએ છીએ લોકોને ફેંકી દે છે. પહેલી વાત એ છે. અને બીજું એ કે અગર યુઝ થઈ રહ્યું છે તો લોકો જ્યાં ફેંકે છે એ ન ફેંકે, અને ગામડાઓના જે સરપંચ હોય તો એના થ્રુ પોતાના ગામની અંદરમાં લઈ અને બધાને કે પ્લાસ્ટિક એક જગ્યાએ ભેગું થાય તો ત્યાંથી અમે કલેક્ટ કરી શકાય. એને ભલે પછી પૈસા દેવા હોય તો આપણે કિલોના હિસાબે પૈસા આપીશું કે પછી એને આપણે જે પ્રોડક્ટ બનાવ્યું છે પ્રોડક્ટ આપી શકાય.
બહુ સારી વાત છે રાજીબેન. So Rajiben said that the main thing is that she wants to use this craft to educate people to not use plastic waste. And I would like to speak a little bit more about it in terms of what plastic is as a material and what the notion of plastic is now. So actually plastic, when it was invented as a very precious material. It was used and it was invented to stop using animal products. So for example, buttons that were made of tortoise shells, they decided to make it out of plastic so as to not kill the turtles. But now what's happening as a result of the very commonplace use and of single-use plastic is that these very animals are dying because of the overconsumption of plastic. So it is a very precious material and it is really required in several industries, especially the medical industry. But right now it's become so commonplace and so use and throw and so energy consuming, where a lot of you need to extract oil from the earth, which is a very precious source, to make a plastic bottle, which is then used for say 10 seconds to 1 minute before it is discarded. So what Rajiben is trying to say is to avoid using plastic in such a consumerist way. And the other thing is, while one is transitioning to its very, very easy alternatives, and while one is still using plastic, to dispose it responsibly. Because what they have to do right now is actually go to these illegal landfills and waste collection points, and the conditions are very, very unhygienic. And I've been there, so I know how it was even difficult for me to record a video in these landfills because it was just so consumed with flies and then you have cattle eating these plastic bags. It was just very, very unhygienic, and they need to go daily to collect these plastic bags. So instead, if the consumer disposes it in a responsible way with the help of the government, such that people like Rajiben can go to them and go to these government authorities, etc., and purchase the plastic waste by the kilo, which is clean, sorted, and doesn't have to go through this whole cleaning process, which is also done manually. So this is one of our points.
Great. Thank you so much, Diti, and thank you so much, Rajiben. Just want to move back to Radhi. Radhi, I know that you have also been involved with Karigar Clinic. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about whether or not initiatives that are being, what are the initiatives, like an extension of what Rajiben is saying for plastic waste? What are the other places where we are lacking in terms of strengthening crafts, as well as strengthening circular economy initiatives, if any of that has come to your attention? Radhi, you're on mute, sorry.
Firstly, about Karigar Clinic. It was a great privilege to launch Karigar Clinic last year with Nilesh Bhai Priyadarshi, who has great sensitivity, as well as has provided great leadership in marketing for artisans. With his amazing ability to be able to create outreach and networks for artisans and their products. So, as many of you know, Pabiben of Pabiben.com is one of the early successes of Karigar Clinic, and Nilesh Bhai has taken on 2 new artisans, of whom Rajiben is one. I think in terms of bridging that gap between what the karigar, the artisan can do, and then how does it reach, say, us or new markets, that's a very important role to play. But I just wanted to us to think about the entire ecosystem, the supply chain, go back to the sourcing that Diti talked about, which is such a challenge, as you said, Diti, because we don't have waste management, we don't have sorting of waste, all of that. And I really wanted to say that as much as it is important for all of us to buy recycled, it's really important for us to become part of that journey of being collectors of materials that can be recycled. And I just wanted to throw it open, in fact, Aliya, to ideas from people like Diti and Bhaavya and Rajiben as to how we could do it, because it seems like it's such a local initiative, because you want to also avoid the carbon footprint of sending waste across through transportation and all of that. That was one. And the other was both with Rajiben's initiative, Diti's design and guidance, and Bhavya's own initiative. They're very much, being handmade. They are slower, they are small scale, and yet they're impactful. So I wondered whether we could talk about the impact that Bhavya's had in the short span that she's had Iro Iro and Diti and you and Rajiben, in terms of impacting people, because um, um, while it's very important to become examples of what the individual can do to impact change, it's interesting just to talk about some of the challenges and some of the successes of these models.
So for us, as waste collection goes, we have been able to, because as you said in the beginning of the session, Jaipur is such a huge hub of production that waste is never at like it is available in abundance. So it's a resource that is available in abundance, and to not utilize it seemed a stupidity to me when I was looking at what do I want to do with my life. And the problem with us also, whenever we go to the kabadi mandi, if we ever go to the kabadi mandi to collect waste, is it is always, it is never sorted. We have to hunt down for the colors that we are looking for. We have to it's always kept in piles where sort of it becomes a home for insects and other creatures to sort of so it doesn't remain hygienic. Then we have to follow it up after collecting the waste. We have to follow it up to make it hygienic again. So but in our case, because everything was already so localized, so even during lockdowns, all the artisans that I have been working with, they had work. They had something, because also we collaborate with other businesses to upcycle their waste. So we had a few collaborations already going on. And so they all had work during those 3 months. And because they already were working from home, so they were all weaving during that time. And that is something that then we could, as soon as lockdown lifted, we could dispatch and bring it back in the cycle. So as per the system goes, the system never stopped because it was already hyper localized. And there, I think India has an advantage because we've always worked there's always been this community system. There's a community that dye the fabrics. There's a community that weave the fabrics. There's a community that make the yarns. So because there is this community systems, and all these communities are sort of placed in a way that it works already in a circular manner. So India that way has an edge to utilize this knowledge and to add contemporary context to it. As for impact goes, we've been able to upcycle now 6,000 kg of textile waste. We've been able to create work for 20 artisans for the past 2 years. And what has been great is that each time we create work, it has been about not about that if I'm able to produce 500 meters today, then I should be able to produce 10,000 meters tomorrow. It is more about if I'm able to, if the artisans are earning 300 rupees a meter today, how do they earn 500 rupees a meter tomorrow? How do they earn 900 rupees a meter the day after? Because that is something that will encourage more artisans to take on this, and as well as to feel they are intellectually involved, to feel that they are the designers, to feel more ownership of the work that they're creating instead of just being treated like laborers. So even the artisans that I'm working with, all of them sort of eventually, like now it's been 3 years that I've been working with them. I've seen 2 artisans turned into entrepreneurs during this journey. And what it does is then it creates more work for more people, and that sort of chain continues instead of being limited to in a linear economy. What would happen is that we'd share our losses, we'd not share our profits. But in a circular economy, we share values, we share this continuous, and what we want is prosperity throughout the value chain. So that way a circular economy works for everyone instead of working for just one.
Great, thank you for that, Bhaavya. Diti, I just wanted to maybe, Radhi, if we could just sum up for Diti the 2 points. The second point was on impact. You wanted them to speak about impact. And the first one was on, you wanted Diti and Rajiben to talk about The supply, where do this, how, yeah.
Yes, yes, the supply, and how could we, as all of the people listening today, and other people who might want to be part of these kinds of initiatives,
Sure.
how do you see the resource management of waste, and how could we participate in it?
We, the consumers, the
Ordinary
buyers,
people,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, world at large. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so firstly, Nilesh Bhai says that Rajiben has to buy the plastic waste at about 30 to 40 rupees per kilo, when it would be better if she could get the plastic waste from a gram panchayat or a municipal corporation. So that was one point that is raised. And in terms of collecting, I do think India is at an advantage also because there is no real system in place as yet. And I know people see that as a negative thing. But what I see here in the West is you don't see the waste. It's all tucked away. So say someone drinks a can of Coke and they put it in the recycling bin and they think they've done their job, and rightly so. But what is actually happening is, if one looks at only plastics alone, less than 10% is actually recycled, and that 10% does not merely disappear, but it enters the vast world and the energy consuming world of the waste industry. So in India, where there is no system in place as yet, I think it's a good time to set an economical and ecological system in place at a local level. So at Thela, the main thing is our waste is local. So the crochet products that I make in Athens is from waste that I collect in Athens and Greece. And yes, it is challenging, but it is prolific. So like, for example, all the corner wine shops over here retail their products in blue plastic bags, which is then consumed by teenagers in parks and on hilltops. So I just have to walk over to these parks to collect blue plastic bags. So each plastic bag like that has a story. I did have collection points, such as, co-working spaces, yoga studios, where people would drop off their plastic waste. But that got me questioning, because people were like, okay, let me take this plastic bag anyway, Diti is going to upcycle it. So I stopped that, because I thought I am encouraging the use of plastic, when the whole point of Thela is to talk to people at an individual level of how they can use less plastic. So yes, a lot of plastic that one gets in the West, and plastic that is slowly picking up here in India, because consumerism is growing, cannot actually be recycled. Like, examples are items that are too small. Like, now we've started getting shampoos in sachets. Not now, like I think since the 90s, which was something that was never available before, or ketchup in sachets, or plastic straws. These items are too small to be recycled. We've started getting, like when we used to have chai, it used to be in those cutting chai pyalis, but now they're in paper cups, which are not actually paper. It cannot be, because paper is going to absorb the hot tea or any beverage. So it is lined with plastic, which makes it even worse, because it's a mix of materials, and then one cannot recycle the paper or the plastic. And items that are very dirty and they are too cumbersome and too expensive to wash at that scale, they are just thrown into the landfill and are not recycled. So I think right now, while there is no legal system in place, it is a good opportunity to start locally at a local level and get people to separate their waste, test it out for a month, see how it is being separated, how people are able to follow instructions about the blue bin or the green bin before actually implementing this separation and involving upcyclers and artisans to purchase or take this waste.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that they charge for the garbage, when it's like you're actually doing the world a boon. So,
Yeah. But they're charging for the garbage because there's a whole system there. There may be people that they are employing. But I think the problem also is that the waste is not separated. So I've seen Rajiben and Anumasi when they were working at Khamir, when Rajiben was working at Khamir, that they are doing the separation themselves of things they need, things they don't need. This is too dirty, this is too torn, these colors, these whatever. So apart from paying for it, they're also doing the dirty work.
Yeah, so before we just move on to some Q&A which we're getting from the participants who are listening in, I was wondering if Diti, if you could just ask Rajiben in terms of because I do want to address the point about the impact of her work. I was wondering if you could ask her to to answer that question as to what does she feel is the impact of the work that she's done from her point of view, as well as practically, like how many bags or how many wrappers, how much do you think has been diverted, or how could we break that down from her point of view? Or is it for her, maybe it's more about the employment that I'm generating, the people around? I mean, just if you could just ask her to to talk a little bit about what she feels she's done so far.
Okay, I'm going to try. Rajiben, તમે જે અત્યારે કામ કરો છો પ્લાસ્ટિકના સાથે ને જે વણાટ કરો છો, એનો તમારા હિસાબથી શું ફાયદો થયો છે? એટલે કેટલું પ્લાસ્ટિક તમે બચાવ્યું છે? તમે કેટલા લોકો સાથે કામ કરો છો? તમે કેટલા લોકોને કામ આપ્યું છે? એનો ફાયદો શું થાય છે?
એનો ફાયદો એક તો એ છે કે અમે લગભગ રોજ 10 થી 15 કિલો પ્લાસ્ટિક કલેક્ટ કરીએ છીએ એક દિવસમાં. અને બીજું એ કે કેમ કે એટલા બધા ગામડાઓ છે કે લગભગ આજુબાજુના 5-10 એવા ગામડા છે, ભુજ સિટી છે, અંજાર છે, તો અમે બધા જગ્યાથી કલેક્ટ કરીએ છીએ. અને બીજો ફાયદો એ છે કે મને એ સારું લાગે છે કે હું એવા બહેનોને કામ આપું છું કે જેને જરૂર છે. એવા બહેનો છે, વિકલાંગ બહેનો જે હોય, એ બહાર ન જઈ શકતા હોય, નાની ઉંમરના છોકરા હોય, તો એવા બહેનોને કામ આપું એ મને સારું લાગે છે. તો એ એક ફાયદો છે. અને પર્યાવરણ બચાવીએ છીએ એ પણ ફાયદો છે, સારું છે.
Of course. Okay. So Rajiben said that she collects 10 to 15 kilos of plastic waste every day, just going door to door. And I'd like to add that Kutch does have a big plastic waste problem, which is why she is able to collect so much directly from the source in just a day, which is very common in many places in India where consumerism hits very suddenly and people are not aware of the impact of what is going on. And suddenly plastic is made so convenient. Like even a chai wala, it is cheaper for him to buy plastic cups than to wash, than the cost of water to wash the cup. So yes, she collects 10 to 15 kilos of plastic a day. And she is very happy and proud because she gets to work with other artisans who are really in need of work. Artisans who cannot get out of their homes, who have children and are homemakers. So she helps and works with them. And she's also very happy and content that she is doing something in this space and diverting plastic from entering landfills and the environment.
And we are extremely grateful for her. Please let her know that. Thank you,
Rajiben. Aliya કહે છે કે ઈ અને બીજા બધા બહુ જ આભારી છે કે તમે આ બધું કામ કરો છો.
થેન્ક યુ. કેમ એમાં કઈ આભાર ન માનવાનું. આપણે દેશ માટે કામ કરીએ છીએ, તો આપણું ફરજ બને છે કે કાંઈ બીજું કાંઈ નહીં, તો આપણાથી જે થઈ શકે છે એવું કાંઈ કરીએ કે આપણું નામ રહી જાય, અને આપણને એવું થાય કે કાંઈક આપણે દેશ માટે નાનું કામ પણ કર્યું. તો બસ એટલા માટે અમે કરીએ છીએ, અને સાથે સાથે રોજગારી પણ બહેનોને આપી રહ્યા છીએ થોડું ઘણું. તો એ બહુ આપણા દેશ માટે સારું છે. તો તમારું પણ થેન્ક યુ.
She thanks everyone, and she also says that there is no need to be grateful because this is like a duty that she's doing for the country, and not just she, but everyone, like all of us who are a part of this. It's just something that we do together. So yes, in a way we are grateful to each other, but she's like trying to skip that formality.
Very kind of her.
She's amazing. Just talking to her, I feel like I get a battery charge every day.
Super. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. And we have some really interesting questions, and I would like to use the time that we have left to address as many of them as we can. So I'm just going to jump into one question, which is aimed at our designers. How did you go about finding the right people, right organizations, and sources? If you could just each of you spend like just run through anything that stands out from that when you started off. Like how did it, how did that, what are the things, the links in the chain that you needed? Diti, why don't you go first since you're unmuted, unless you needed time to think about it.
No, I'm good. So basically, for me, the brand started very organically. I saw a lot of waste in Athens, and I've always wanted to work with plastic waste. So I literally began collecting and crocheting myself. And of course, it wasn't feasible as a business model. And so to expand, my option was to either work with aunties and refugee communities here in Athens, or to work with like-minded organizations in India. I had already visited Khamir because it was in my interest even before I started Thela to figure out what's going on with plastic waste. And I thought Khamir was a really, really good intermediary for me to work with because I don't live in India. So I may not have the time or the resources to be able to set up my own unit. But I find Khamir extremely transparent, extremely friendly and professional and honest at the same time. They are very open about what they pay the artisans. And I do think it is fair. Like I do think it is fair considering. I mean, overall, the prices need to go up, and both the artisans and Khamir need to be paid a lot more for their craft. What I think is unfair is I'll end up paying a lot more for the tailoring and the shipping. I'll end up paying a lot more to stock my products in other shops than I'm paying the artisans. So tomorrow, if Thela is something that grows to what I would like it to, I would really like to contribute more to artisans and communities. And I do think Khamir plays a really good role in getting artisans the reach and the work. So artisans themselves can focus on the work, and they don't need to think about how to put themselves out there, how to get clients and get the work. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I did visit Khamir, and I did look in detail at their processes before I was okay and very, very happy actually to work with them.
So you sort of vetted it for yourself in a sense.
I vetted it for myself, and I do that with the people I work with and the entire process. So I may not be okay with the process that Khamir employs, but they are very, very open to experimentation. And me being a very, very small customer for them, they are still very willing to make innovations with me, like working on organic cotton for the warp, making custom sheet sizes, which, they take care of. I mean, I know the artisans on a personal level, but they take care of communicating that with the artisans. And it is challenging to work with artisans in terms of professionalism, time delays, and things like that, which they are sort of take responsibility for. So all that was something I was very happy with.
Got it.
With both Khamir and with Karigar Clinic.
Just before we move on to Bhavya, I just wanted to just underscore something. I think from what I understood from what you just said is that in your business, the logistics and admin costs are actually greater than your material and labor costs at this point in time. Got it.
Definitely.
Okay, great.
And even my production is fair trade, and it's certified fair trade, unfortunately, because that is what people in the West understand and buy in. So that also is more expensive than weaving the fabric, than paying the artisan. So I do think that is very unfair.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you said, unfortunately, that's a whole separate conversation.
It's a separate conversation
in another session. But thank you so much. Thank you so much, Diti. Bhavya, why don't you share with us, please, if you can, your
for me it was a problem that like I needed to solve, because for me it was more about making the system of apparel manufacturing circular, because I grew up in that system. I grew up exposed to how wasteful it can be. So for me, it was more about making it circular, and the natural solution to it was crafts. What ended up happening was that it became a system that is replicable, that we could replicate for other organizations and with other artisans. So that is what allowed us to sort of, and is allowing us to expand. But because we've been so compact, we've been so condensed, and we've not sort of taken on food on our plate that we couldn't eat. What has happened is that people who we have collaborated with, or people who have reached out to us, or people who we are collaborating with, like artisans, they already have that sensibility that why what we are doing is important, and then they add their own layer to it, which is what I personally love about what I do. Is I get to I get to work with people who have the same value system, but they come from a entirely different lived experience. And that is where I get to grow, I get to learn, I get to learn a lot. With the artisans I work with, they were actually working for Khadi, and they were being paid 17 rupees a meter, and they were able to weave somewhere 5 meters a day, 5 to 7 meters a day. And that is not even the minimum wage that has been set by the government, for the very government that they were weaving fabric. So they were, some of them had left weaving. They were working as construction laborers in Jaipur, in Delhi, to earn 1,000 rupees a day and to send that money back to the village. And they would live in slums and all of that. Whereas in the village, they'd have farms and they have their homes. So when I started my experiments, I started working with two artisans who would work with me only on Saturdays and Sundays, and I'd just go to the village and work with them. And then eventually, as and when there were clients and collaborators, and there was work, people, as soon as their sort of family got to know about it, artisans started moving back to the village. And that was something I was very like surprised by. I never imagined when I started out that artisans would now move back to the village, and we'd create enough work for all of these people to have something that sustains them all year long, instead of something that is more seasonal. And what is great is now I get to also see them teaching their daughters weaving, them teaching their sons weaving, or other like sort of taking on apprentices, younger apprentices, to teach weaving or to teach other skills. We are right now experimenting with the dyeing processes, making the fabric more stain resistant, using more indigenous knowledge to do that. We are utilizing, there is a very local type of knitting that happens in the region, and utilizing that to sort of, and that only women do, to create a women's collective. And so it's actually very exciting, because there is a lot of energy and there is a lot of enthusiasm to do work. It's just that we need that trigger to create that work. We need that. Also, we need appreciation from the customer to say that this is something that they want, instead of something that has been created within 2 days, or just stitched, or is something that is available. Like you have 10,000 products of it available. We want people to say that we want unique products. We want something that speaks of our values, and as well as speaks of our aesthetics. And which is why also collaborating with artisans, because they have been for such a long time communicating that message effectively, was a dream come true for me as well, personally.
Super. Thank you so much. So I guess I hope that, the audience is getting a clear sense that, there's a lot of drive and passion behind the creators in this particular segment, and it's really quite a challenge, and they're doing it rather well, rather good humor, and great design. So hats off to everybody. We have a very specific question, which is, I think Rajiben will be able to definitely help us. Diti, you could also help us. The question is, how much plastic waste do we need to make a tote bag?
To make a tote bag, again, it depends on the size, but I would say around 30 plastic bags, 30 to 40 plastic bags. And
just like
also,
plastic bags, yeah.
Yeah, the normal average size carry bag. With crochet, it takes a lot more, because crochet is a knotting technique. So it takes up a lot more yarn, but I'll ask Rajiben as well. Just a sec. Rajiben, સપોઝ તમે થેલી બનાવો જે શાકભાજી લેવા જઈએ ને, તો એમાં ઈ બનાવવા માટે, એનું વણાટ કરવા માટે કેટલા પ્લાસ્ટિક થેલી વપરાય?
થેલી તો અંદાજ લગભગ 10-15 થેલી લાગતી હશે, પણ એમાં વજન થી લાગે છે વધારે, કેમ કે આમ હવે હજી એટલું ઓછું ગણતરી કરી છે, પણ એક બેગમાં લગભગ 200 ગ્રામ પ્લાસ્ટિક જોઈએ છે.
Saru. So she says about 10-15 plastic bags. The handbags I make take up about 30 to 40. So it is, as you can see, very subjective. And Rajiben works not only with plastic bags, but also wrappers, like biscuit wrappers, plastic sheets used in agriculture as reflectors, or, on the beds to grow fruits and vegetables. So they mainly go by weight. And she said a tote bag or a vegetable market bag would take about 200 grams of plastic.
Thank you so much. We have a question, which I think the designers have sort of answered, but I would be really interested to hear what Radhi also has to say. The question is, how do we keep prices affordable with the sustainable products?
Good question. It's, one of those things that we struggle with all the time, because here in India, the context is quite different from the West, where something that is slow and that is done in small batches, and as you heard, individually, so that most products are one-off. In the West, it would command a premium. But here, unfortunately, it's a matter of two things. One is perception. Something that is recycled, upcycled is not perceived with that kind of value as yet. The other thing is that, although we haven't been certified, our model is very much a fair trade model. So we will never quibble with an artisan about their wages. In fact, as Diti said, I would hope that most artisans we can support on the minimum wage level, the local NREGA level, because there has been a great migration of high skilled artisans to low skilled construction work, because NREGA, the government scheme for the minimum wage work, offers more per day. So when we come into the picture, I apply the same thinking that it needs to be fair, not just to the maker, but the buyer. And then, as you heard from Diti, there are a lot of expenses in promotion, administration, marketing. So how do we create an honest margin that isn't an over the top margin, so that we can sustain ourselves as a sustainable marketplace, but help the entire community to be able to sell and to be able to be visible on a platform beyond artisans. So I think it's all along for the stakeholders, the artisans or the makers, the designers too, like Bhaavya, who work with them, us as retailers promoting. So I would just say that we're a little bit more than a retail organization, because we're very invested in the promotion of the ideas as much as the products. And thirdly, to make sure that these are prices that customers are comfortable with. So very often I'm taken aback when some people come to artisans and say, oh, it's really well priced. In fact, this should be priced higher. It's a very tough sort of balance to keep. But thank you for asking that question, because, during the downturn, or rather the complete lack of business in the last 8 to 9 months in Kala Ghoda, we've seen many businesses fold. And the only reason that we continue to survive is because I'm not paying market rent. As many people know, we own the building, and we're very much subsidized by renting out the street level space. But all of that took a great hit. And it's really passion and commitment that helps us to remain in business, and also to grow our online presence, which was non-existent before. So craft is not easy. It's not easy as a business, because the numbers that you're talking about are much lower than, say, fashion or luxury fashion, other FMCGs, as it should be. And I really feel that one of the things that we have worked very hard on is to change the perception of craft in India as cheap and cheerful, particularly outside, in the world outside. We have to value artisans like Rajiben, like the weavers that Bhaavya works with. If we don't, we're going to be at a point where we are going to lose these high skills, particularly, as I said, at a time like right now, when I don't know how the Manrega schemes are working at the moment locally, whether they are, but that kind of assured government income for low skills is just a tragedy if we see the migration of highly skilled people in a country that has such a diversity of hand skills and crafts. And you may have heard the statistic, it's a little old, but I think that it still may be valid, that of the retail market globally of handmade, India has less than 2% of the share. So we have a long way to go. We have an incredible opportunity if we can make it work. As far as business, I come from, wearing mostly a design hat. Um, we do have Nilesh Bhai on, on our, as part of our audience. Would you like to ask him, Aliya, how do we turn these fragile businesses into something that is viable for the future?
I think that's probably an entire whole other session. But Nilesh Bhai has made a comment. He has said that if operational costs are lower, then artisans can be able to sell at affordable prices. That's why we advocate for micro businesses. And that's why Rajiben's products have all been placed at under 1,000 rupees. I think that, there is, this is a very long discussion. We'll probably be having many more sessions, but we're crossing 90 minutes on this session. So I think we will now have to just wrap it up with the last few audience questions that we have. The one question that I would like to conclude the session with is a session on a session from one of our audience members who's asking us that currently we're looking at models, we're talking about models which utilize waste that is generated in existing processes. What are the prospects for eliminating the waste in the first place? I'm going to just break this down. I would like to start off with talking about it on plastics, because plastics is something, as Diti said, is not it's something that it sort of came in at a later stage, and it's taken over pretty quickly, and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. In fact, during the I'm sure every house has generated much more waste this year than it would have done in a normal year. So I would just want to ask Diti and Rajiben, you guys are working with waste out of duress, in a sense, with plastic waste. Correct me if that's too, harsh a statement.
No, it's very true. When it comes to plastic waste, like I said, with Thela, we are also doing this to talk to people about how easy and non-daunting it is to live with less plastic, which I understand is a challenge because plastic now is so omnipresent, and even in India, it is getting more and more challenging to avoid. And there is plastic present in so many more things and materials than we can even imagine, apart from it being in its direct form of plastic. Like there are plastics in fabrics, there are plastics in the paper cup that you're having coffee in. Anything one orders from anywhere comes in excessive plastic packaging. So I think the idea is to adopt a sustainable lifestyle and journey which is personalized for you. It varies from person to person depending on one's habits and needs. And my basic suggestion would be to start with maybe just a few changes or even one change at a time. For everyday living, you can adopt something that is a lot more challenging, but just do it once or twice a week and not every day. And that also creates a big impact. So even me, on my personal journey of living as sustainably as possible, I'm very mindful of taking it easy. So of living as sustainably as possible and of trying to do my best with awareness and compassion instead of trying to be perfect. So I do whatever it is in my power and I let go of the rest, and that is okay. And it is actually such an interesting, exciting and creative journey. It's like, okay, my toothbrush, I need a new toothbrush, but I don't want to buy a plastic one. So what can I do? And then you research it and look online, and you'll be surprised to see that there are alternatives to literally everything. I mean it. I mean 100%. There is an alternative, whether it is your floss or whether it is your tiffin ka dabba or whether it is the clothing you wear. And yes, it can be affordable. And it can be longer lasting. So even if one pays a little bit extra, it is something that is you're reusing. Like, for example, the menstrual cup is something that I have bought for X rupees, but I'm using it for 10 years. That I would spend on sanitary napkins. And then additionally, it is so convenient because I never have to buy sanitary napkins. I'll never run out. I'll never have to suddenly send a family member down to the chemist to get me a sanitary napkin. It's so convenient. So it is actually a very interesting and creative and so personally fulfilling a process that I cannot stress more on encouraging people to just look out there, be a little sensitive, go online and see all the beautiful things and products that are available that are moderately priced. And it may seem a little inconvenient, but trust me, it is convenience for the planet and for the environment, which in turn, in the long term, is convenience for us and our future generations. So it's just so logical to me.
I guess that it's consumers, individuals do have these awakenings. Like a lot of times, when we meet people, when we start getting aware about there's something wrong and then something's off. Like what can I do? I'm always fascinated as to how that awakening could happen within a company or within an industry. The industry transformation side of it is, or the culture of a government or any group that's in charge, authorities. Always fascinating just to consider how awakenings can take place in those larger groups. Because individuals, of course, will transform completely. I mean, it's we've seen the trajectory. It's every day there's new people who are interested in sustainability. But I think it's important to also keep asking the organizations and the large units, like, what do you feel about it? Like, what's happening with your waste? That kind of.
That's very true, and that's where the impact lies, much more than at an individual level. But I think the awareness starts at an individual level. So then it can move. Like an organization can ask their employees to bring their own mug for the coffee machine, and then that can move on to bigger things and systems and processes within the organization once that awareness builds. So starting from small to scaling it.
Sure. Would you just trouble Rajiben with her inputs on this last question because this will be the last section, and then we'll have everybody answer the question, and then we'll sign off. But I would be really curious to hear what how she would feel if there would be no plastic waste, and what would she probably be doing if she wasn't doing this then?
Okay. I don't see Rajiben. Is she there?
She might have logged off.
We lost Rajiben 5 minutes ago.
Okay. Well, we'll try and have that. Yeah.
What I'd like to say about Rajiben is that, of course, she, like all of us, did get into the consumerism, just like we all did. So even while going shopping for vegetables and fruits and all, they did start giving plastic carry bags, which is in a very immediate sense a lot more convenient. So they were doing that, but getting involved with this whole plastic upcycling process, she not only takes her own tote bag with her, but she also uses these plastic carry bags to make tote bags for people in her community to carry them to the sabzi walas. So that is her transformation. But I mean, all of us bought into it, It was presented to us as a cheaper and convenient option.
Thank you so much, Diti. Bhaavya, I wanted to ask you, we are now in the field of textiles, which is, if it's not synthetic, it's not as deadly and it's not as harmful as plastic, but it's still a material. And I just wanted to ask you what you felt about the material culture of textiles, the volume of production, because the waste that's coming is not just from irresponsible management during the production process. It's also from the excess as well as the lack of awareness that this can have a life after I use it. So, philosophically, how would you feel if I said we're going to stop producing textile yarn altogether? All you can work with is only the existing yarn on earth. Is that the answer? Or because how do you address the issue of there will always be a need to produce something in order to keep it? And that's why we're trying to go circular, so that we're producing from what we already produced,
Right.
and as opposed to throwing that away.
I actually was doing this research with one of senior designers, and she sort of took out these harsh statistics saying that this one developed country, they are importing, say, out of the 100% of their imports that are garments, they are only using 10%. At the cost, like they're able to retail only 10% at the cost that they are supposed to retail at. 70% is being retailed at a discount, and rest 30% is going to the trash. And what happens is when fabric is also going to the landfill, if it has been in 90% cases, it has been treated with chemical dyes. Even in its decomposition, it releases methane and cancerous gases in the air. So we need to be very careful about how we are utilizing textiles. We need to form relationship with the clothes that we own, and with any purchase that we are going to make, it needs to be sort of an investment. What I realized after that particular research was that if a garment worker, say for a tailor, is just being paid 50 rupees to produce 5 or 6 of these garments in one day, and he's able to produce those at a cheaper quality, what would be great would be that if we reduce the quantity of the order, but we increase the wage of the tailor, and thereby increasing the price of that single unit of the garment. What that will do is that will create a more of an effect. It'll create better quality of life. The tailor isn't working 18 hours a day. He'd work only 5 to 6 hours a day to produce these. And there would be a fairer working condition that they'd all work in. So this is something that we actually inculcated at our factory, because I'm also attached with the garment factory, and we have customers who come from like developed countries, and they'd say that, we really like the style that you've made, and can you make 5,000 pieces of it, and can you deliver it to us within 90 days, and but we'll just pay $3 each for each unit. So we refuse now. We don't accept that. And if we see more and more suppliers refusing to take such orders, then we'd see even the customers sort of thinking about it, because then these people come back to us because we stand for a certain quality, and we stand for a certain how things are made, and fair trade and all of that, and we are in the process of getting our fair trade certificate. So when they do come back to us, then they talk about how they would like to order just 300 pieces in a specific style, pay a living wage that sort of prospers the whole value chain instead of just prospering them. So I feel it's a more larger systems issue, like design in isolation, or what I do in isolation is I can inform people, I can have conversations with people, but as a system, how can we react, and how can we react to this problem is something that I feel that we can have a larger impact with.
Sure. I mean, I think it's really interesting what you just said about putting value, which is money, in the right place. The concept of paying the tailor more than ordering some surplus stock just because maybe you think that you might, because you haven't perhaps put in enough I don't want to say you haven't figured out exactly what your production cycle is going to be. So perhaps you're playing it safe. You're going to order extra because you have the budget, but because you're going to order that extra, then it's like, okay, where can I cut it from? And it's like, okay, like let's cut it from this, stitching, or we're not going to cut it from marketing because we just heard how important marketing is. But
and they burn it if they're not able to sell it. We know of Burberry doing it. They became public, but a lot of brands, they just burn the stock that is not being sold, and burning it is again releasing very harmful pollution causing gases in the air. And what about the labor that goes into making this stock, and that is just being burned in these developed countries?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things which are, currently, they just, when you sit back and you take perspective that there's limited amount of resources, there's limited amount of money, and there's, lives today. People are also, I think the pandemic has also taught us that your health and my health, it's connected. So if I'm not paying you and you can't feed yourself properly, and if you're going to you're vulnerable, then essentially the whole community is vulnerable, which is why it's so important for business people to understand that there's no wall between them and the rest of the world. So somebody who works for them, their livelihood, like their basic everyday quality of the experience that they go through, it's connected to the quality of the experience that their family members are also going through. And that's why it's important to care about people and keep them healthy, because essentially it's just like one big swimming pool. So
Absolutely. In fact, I'm sorry, I'll just add this one little bit. The factory that I work with, there, what they say is, and this I learned from them, is if how you make food, when you are making food, if you're making food in a bad mood, then the food comes out bad. So if you're making garments in a bad mood, they're going to come out bad. So which is why it is very important to treat all your workers fairly, so that whatever they make comes out of good quality and produces more goodness at the end.
I get a sense now why this whole factory production bit caught on. Because this requires so much discipline and calm and patience. So yeah, so thank you so much, Bhaavya. I would now like to just conclude with Radhi, because in the pre-discussion for this session, Radhi was actually telling us about a plan that she wanted to turn Artisans into a place where we could do some collection of textiles. And I was wondering if you could just do a little bit on that, because it's a new idea that we hope to take forward, and it's also part of the notion of how are we going to be able to eliminate waste.
Thank you, Aliya. So the idea came about very recently when we had someone who had recycled saris, and saris that belonged to his sister who had passed away earlier this year. And when he kind of was done with gifting those saris, he began to recycle them. And from one sari, he would make two. And the proceeds are going to a cancer hospice. But the idea was, what if and when he runs out of saris at home to recycle? So we thought we would start this sari bank, which is a place where you can bring saris that you no longer wear, or your mother's, or someone's sari that you would like to have an extended life for. So we've started the sari bank, but when we began to talk, Aliya, Bhaavya, and the other day, we were just wondering whether there's a way to extend this. and how could we extend it to being a textile collection that would be, meaningful, as well as something that has a lot of stigma attached to it, which is secondhand, vintage secondhand. How do we kind of become a place where people can bring those in, and where that object gets a new lease of life? So it's still in the initial stages, Aliya. And I think, as Diti and Bhaavya both said, that we need to think of very hyper local solutions. So we're just figuring it all out, but we're starting with the sari bank.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been one of our longest sessions, and I really, really appreciate the time. And I really want to thank all my panelists and everyone who's been listening. And I think that's it. We're going to sign off now. So please, everyone, have a good evening, day, night, depending on where you are in the world. And we'll see you all very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.